Supposed to put that on?
Yep, sure.
There it is. Safety and Development Committee will come to order. All members are present with the exception of Alderperson Tenario, who is excused. First order of business is approval of minutes of July 8th, 2021.
I move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item D2 on the agenda, discussion relative to recent passage of an ordinance to adopt state standards for automatic fire sprinkler systems.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman
if
Weigel.
I may, just by way of background, some of you probably don't know this, but I believe it was 2009, 2008 was the recession, things were really bad everywhere. West Allis has always had this, or up until that point, and it's still with us, this reputation. Contractors would call us like worst Allis, or
Oh, I've
tough
heard,
place to
yeah.
do business. We've all heard those stories. The council, I believe unanimously voted to, and directed all of our department heads, chairs, everybody, to go through our rules, regulations, ordinances, and anywhere we are stricter than the state, that we wanted to dial it back and be on a par with the state code. And I have, I think we all supported that, and over the next, period of, 18 months to 2 years, I think variously department heads and chairs came forward, and like, we're gonna change this, bring it in line with state code, and we kind of thought we were all done with that. Apparently, we were not. We did have this fire sprinkle code, at what point a business needs to be sprinkled relating to its use and or the amount of remodeling going on. I sponsored a resolution and it passed the committee unanimously a week ago, and it went to the floor and we all 10 voted on it, with the idea that this is what we wanted to do. At that committee meeting, Chief Pooler came, I would say at the 11th hour, but it was the 11th hour and the 59th minute and the 59th. He actually came with an amendment to change it. And I think the verbiage has to do with when do we require it. The idea, right, so right now, the state code is maybe a little vague, and maybe it's vague intentionally, that says when a building is remodeled more than 50%, the certain type, the certain use of building, it has to be sprinkled. Okay. Well, what does remodeled 50% mean? Does that, to me, here's the questions, and this is what's worthy, I think, of a discussion. I mean, if it's a legitimate thing that we should be dealing with, does that mean 50% over the life of a building? Okay. Does it mean 50% in any single remodel job? Does it mean 50% in a calendar year? The argument I think that the fire chief was making was that it should be the life of the building. Otherwise, people will, quote, get around it by doing 25% this year, 30% next year, And, if that's what the state intended, I believe they would have said that, I hope, or, I guess I don't know. But even if we're gonna say it's over the life of a building, how are we gonna manage that? Are we someone, whether it's bins or the fire department, gonna go to all of our unsprinkled commercial spaces, see how much remodeling has been done so far, and then assign a number to it? So, well, this building's already a 42, so from now on, in perpetuity, it can only get 8% more remodel. Okay, if that's something that we're going to do, then that is something we should tell everybody that what we're doing. Okay, and it should be attached to like the deed or something. So any potential buyer, you could conceivably buy a building with the intention of taking it over with occupancies cleared and all that, with the idea it's like, I'm gonna do 5% remodel. Oh, no, that building's already at 48. You're gonna have to sprinkle now. And sprinkle can be tens of thousands of dollars, or I hear numbers like 80 or 90 or more. depending on the scope of the building, the street, you most typically have to bring in a whole new water feed. And if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna do all that, that completely defeats the idea of we don't wanna be stricter than the state code. And the reason we don't wanna be stricter than the state code is we don't wanna put West Allis at a competitive disadvantage to our neighbors. I firmly believe that if this life of the building rule was meant to be, in effect, it would have been put in writing in the state code. And that's why I don't believe, and okay, let's go back to, let's say 50% of the building. Let's say I remodeled, take my bar and restaurant as an example. I remodel my dining room and I do a 40% remodel of the dining room, okay? Well, guess what? There's a new craze now and everybody wants to bring back bucking bronco, urban cowboy thing. I remodel my dining room again, another 40%, okay? Was that an 80% remodel? Did I just go over the 50%? And the real question is, are we solving a problem that's not really happening? Okay, do we have building owners or business owners that are getting around this 50% rule by doing 30% this year and 30% next year and 30% the year after? Does anybody in this room, I'll ask this Tom, more senior than me, has the fire department ever said, hey, this guy's getting around the 50%?
I've never heard of any.
I've never heard of that either. Okay, so that's my take on the 50% rule. You know what? To me, yeah, maybe there is a point at which buildings need to be remodeled. But I would see there's got to be some point where the amount of remodeling, the meter gets set back to zero. And maybe that changes with an owner, the new owner, so any individual owner. Okay? And we look at owners, we've had cases on license and health where we've had an owner in trouble and he's tried to sell the business to his girlfriend or something.
Yeah.
And we're able to suss that out and keep that from happening. So again, if I own my business and I do 40% this year, oh man, I'd really like to do another 40%. I'm gonna sell it to my nephew or something, and nothing really changes. That's where I think we can suss out that legit, ownership change. The other thing that I think we need to talk about is, I don't think any of you saw this. This was an email that, and I'm sorry I was I highlighted, this was an email that Zeke Dombrowski from our fire department sent to an applicant on this very issue today. I have more copies.
Yeah, that's one.
I highlighted the pertinent point. I was kind of hoping that
Here.
Chief Pooler was going to be here today. Okay.
Yeah.
So apparently, when we changed the fire code, the change isn't effective immediately. We have to tell the state we're changing the fire code, and they have 120 days to review the change to see if they're okay with the change. Now, in as much as the verbiage in our what passed last week is I think it says exactly in line with the state fire code. I'm not sure why we're holding up an applicant on this right now for another 4 months.
This is strictly our requirement, not the state requirement that they review it?
This is the state's requirement.
So the state requires that we send our ordinance change to them to approve?
Yes.
But we're going to a code that's already adopted.
But we're not. We're bringing our code exactly in line with the state.
I understand that.
So,
Right.
so the question is, okay, and I see this all the time. And when I was on license and health, and if we had, like a site and landscape plan review, I would always ask, an applicant, how onerous is this going to be for you? Okay. In this particular case, which was what brought this to my attention, the fact that we were more onerous than the state, she's already paying rent on a space that she wants to expand into. Okay. And another 120 days is before apparently our staff will even review her plan, is, that's 4 months of rent.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what her rent is,
doesn't matter.
but, I think we oftentimes, we've all gotten the call, hey, Mr. Alderman, the building inspector is on the plumbing inspector, but I have never said, let's not enforce the code. I said, you want me to tell the guy not to do his job? But when clearly this should have been passed 9 years ago,
Right.
okay? When we directed whoever the chief was then to dial back our code to come in line with the state code.
Well, except Alderman Weigel, if you'll remember, a few years back, I think it was Alderman Narlock introduced a proposed ordinance to do just that, and it was turned down by the council.
I thought we passed that.
No, we didn't. It was to amend the sprinklers, and we did not pass it.
We did not pass
No, I
it.
remember Marty King was in here from the fire department. He was the inspector at the time, arguing against passage of it, and it was defeated.
Yeah, see, I'll defer to you on that, but why do we want to be stricter than the state code? Is the state code not safe?
Yeah, it's fine.
I guess, I don't know what, I'm glad Kale's here. The idea is that can we not enforce this 120-day delay? And can we direct the lieutenant, the fire, Bureau of Fire Prevention to direct Shelley, our plan reviewer, to get on this? So this business owner who wants to expand their existing business in the downtown can move forward.
So a lot packaged into that question. One, the 120-day thing is a state requirement that anytime anyone amends their local fire sprinkler code, it has to be approved by Department of Safety and Professional Services. That would make sense normally if we were actually amending it to some other substantive provision that was different from the state. They have to confirm a few standards in state law to make sure that it's legal. This is a complete repeal of local standards, though, and so I don't think there's going to be much for the state to review, and I think it will be simply passed forward very quickly. However, that 120 days is still out there, and I don't know when the state will respond. So technically, it still remains in the books until the state moves forward. As far as your question on enforcement, it goes down to the old separation of powers doctrine, where this body creates the laws but does not enforce. The fire department enforces but does not create. And so it is on the books. The fire department, as the executive branch, does have the discretion to decide whether to enforce or not enforce a law like this. It's on the books. I can tell you that from a prosecutorial standpoint, I would be part of the executive branch. If a legislative body repealed a law but didn't make it effective for a procedural matter, the odds that I'm going to prosecute violators of that ordinance is extremely low. And that's because the body that created the law has already declared something to be not worthy of being enforced. And so it almost would be like you're trying to convict or seek convictions on violations for something that will soon be legal. And it just doesn't seem like a good use of prosecutorial discretion to do so.
Yeah, but at this point, that 120-day delay is keeping her plan, it's keeping her from doing work because it's actually keeping her plan from being reviewed.
So the next step would be, what can the council do about that? First, we are an optional powers city, and so it's actually more likely the PFC would have administrative control over the fire and police department rather than the council. But then it goes down to the idea of the separation of powers. So a legislative body cannot direct necessarily an executive branch to do or not do something. The mayor would be one person who is part of the executive branch who has the ability to at least direct something. But because of those optional powers, really it's probably the PFC's call here.
So I should be lobbying the PFC on this.
That would be one way. I think the more direct route would be, though, to lobby the chief, because the chief is going to be the more on-the-ground person who decides whether to enforce a law or not. Typically, I think you said it right, for building codes, we would rather enforce those rules. They're there for a reason, and they're not changing anytime that I've seen in the future. This is a very unique situation that's unusual for both plan reviewers, fire inspector, everyone. It's unusual that there's a law that's passed and it's not immediately effective. So I think I understand why the initial reaction was, well, it's a law in the books, because that's how normally codes are enforced. But because of the unique situation, this is one where I would have no problem with the fire department not enforcing at this point in time.
My question would be, who is reviewing the plan? Is it Steve's department, planning commission, planning department? Or is it the fire department?
This is a construction permit that would have to go through bins, through building
The
inspection.
building
Our
inspection.
commercial plan reviewer would
So
would
then,
go through it.
what does PFC have to do with that?
Because it's a commercial building and within the commercial code, there are fire rules. And so the fire department is the one who determines for compliance with,
Okay, I understand the compliance part, but that doesn't mean that bins can't look at the plan and say, looks okay.
they would likely have some sort of
They-
policy in place where they would need approval from the fire department before reviewing it. That's my guess as to why there's a delay. But it'd be more of an informal internal policy that, again, if the fire department would say, go ahead and review, even though this law is on the books, I wouldn't have a problem with that, given the unique situation that we're in right now.
How
But
long does it take typically to review a plan like that?
Well, building inspection usually is what, 10 days, 10 working days? I may have changed a little bit recently, but about 10,
Okay, so-
yeah.
Let's say 2 weeks.
Yeah,
That's a lot less than 120 days.
yeah.
Yes. So I should reach out to Ed tomorrow on this?
Ed and the chief, it
And the
sounds like,
chief?
yeah.
Yeah, and the chief,
Okay.
and get the chief
Mhm.
to okay
Yeah,
the review.
it would ultimately be at their discretion, so you could,
No, I can't tell them to do
yeah.
it. Yeah, I understand that. So, but just so I know, are we all okay with the ordinance as we passed it
Yeah,
last week? Okay.
All right.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just gonna add, yeah, 'cause really what's remodeling, as we even spoke about.
And that's a whole nother story.
You know, is it floors, is it carpet, is it taking off drywall, is it new paint, is it, what's remodeling? A hammer, like does someone have to bring
In
out
the
a
particular
heavy tool?
case, Mr. Chair, in the particular case that we were working on, it was a matter of just cutting a hole in the wall. Just creating access to a bigger space, and that was a 50% increase. And when we were going through that, the question of remodeling did come up. Was it remodeling, because they were just gonna paint the walls and because they were creating that access, it was increasing her space by 50%.
I think what happened was the architect not being cognizant of this 50% rule. As he explained to me, if we're gonna cut a hole in this wall, a door, to put a door in, what the standard accepted practice is, you draw a box 2 feet, let's say this is the width of the door, 2 feet this way, 2 feet out that way, 2 feet down here, 2 feet down here. So whatever this is, and I may be wrong, this is as this architect described to me, so whatever this ends up being, 8 by 4, because it's 2 feet this way, 2 feet, so, 32 square feet. And so it'd be 32 square feet of this room that is, I don't know, what is it, 50 by 20? I don't know, 40 by 20, whatever it is. So that clearly would be a small percentage. But somehow, in his original application, he just said, well, we're modeling this entire room, And I was surprised that the architect wasn't familiar with this, because he's known in the community. But that's what I think set it off originally. And, because they just looked at his math, and nobody went down and looked, it's like, well, they're really just putting a door in. Okay. So my understanding also is that after the most recent review, this particular project would not be held up by the 50% rule. But we have this idea going forward of what city do we want to be? Do we want to be worst Allis again? Do we want to be, I had another contractor tell me, for a while Menominee Falls was getting really bad, and they started calling it North Dallas. So, that's the problem with a reputation you get. Once you get a reputation for
I
something,
know, you're right.
it's hard to get over that. And this, to me, would be a step backwards, so.
Any further discussion or comments on this? I guess ultimately, Gil, I think it would be good to try to get some kind of a feeling for us, for building inspection and planning, as to what the heck is 50%.
Yeah, well, what is remodeling? What is remodeling?
Right, is it just
And it
if
may
I
not
take
be-
up this and put
It
down
may not be
vinyl
your
floors?
decision to do that, but if you could
I
do
can-
some checking and see
I
what,
can tell you right now.
And
oh, what is it?
So by the state code, first off, our local code used the word remodel. Remodel is not a word recognized in the international existing building code, which caused confusion on a different level.
Okay.
The way that the state code works is they adopt the IEBC, and that uses the phrase work area. Work area is basically any alteration within a certain area. An alteration is also further defined, so there's a very set way of defining it. And so remodel caused its own problems. That's where you're talking about carpet and paint and things like that. Well, that would be probably a repair under the state law, so it wouldn't be necessarily an alteration, because repair is separately defined to essentially maintain a current facility. Alteration, you change the actual layout, or
Cutting
you
a door.
change something.
Cutting a door.
That's an alteration. And in addition, is something totally separate, where you're increasing square footage. So you could use the terms in the state law, we didn't do that though in our code. So that caused confusion. But the actual code says the work area exceeds 50% of the floor area. So the calculation you just ran in that example would be approximately what it is what is the work area? What is the area that's under renovation? And then you take that as a percentage of the total work area. So like in this case, it would be either a change in use, or depending on, there's a few different ways in which sprinklers are required, but either a change in use or exceeding a certain square footage of floor area. If you then have 50% of that larger floor area that you're altering, then that what's triggering a sprinkler. The concept of doing something only a certain percentage and then doing it later, that would come down to an enforcement question as to whether you think the person's attempting to circumvent the rule. And I think would be a very factual inquiry. The difference, I think, too, is because the state law doesn't apply to, like, the issue we were running into here was that the local sprinkler code applied to smaller buildings. And a smaller building is going to be naturally a smaller budget for whatever renovations you're doing. And then a sprinkler system, though, is not very commensurate to that.
It doesn't get cheaper when it's small.
It's very expensive on upfront cost, and then throwing the pipes in is actually relatively cheap. So it's a very expensive cost for a small building, but because the state code only applies to much larger buildings, or generally larger projects, which means the sprinkler is a smaller percentage of the cost of the project. So I don't think you're going to have as much of an issue with people getting cute with that 50% rule as you might think, because it's going to be naturally part of the process. Someone who's operating a larger building,
And McDonald's comes in, does a
someone's going to operate a larger building is less likely to have an incentive to do this 48%, 48%,
Doesn't come in.
12 months apart, hiring two contractors, having half a building built out and still trying to be open for 12 months. It would be a much more of a larger problem for their business likely than it'd be worth. Plus, once they get the sprinkle in, they probably get lower insurance and other things that would help them with the cost. So, and they have a larger budget to start. I don't see it as being a significant likelihood. If it comes up, we'd handle it case by case, but that's the way it works right now. That's how I interpret it.
Should we be updating our ordinances to remove the word remodeling?
That's been removed already by the council at the
has.
last meeting.
Okay, so that was removed at the last meeting, okay. Any other questions or comments?
development guys, anything? No?
I just ask
What, then the local fire code is sort of, it's just references the IBC? Or is there,
it refers to state statute.
Yes.
Sorry, Kelly, you
Yeah.
answered.
Yep.
State statute.
Yep, so it's just adopts the
Not by
state statute,
reference.
and state code.
I would just say thank you for taking the progressive action on this to change it, because it's come up, frequently. And in the past, we've actually provided loans to businesses to actually take care of a sprinkling issue on some. I might remember, is it Rocamco, the grill business that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's before my time, but we've had this issue for a while, so it's nice to see some change. And seeing what it was doing on this downtown particular case was really perplexing, so.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll move on to item 3. This is a discussion relative to proposed second round of rezoning of certain properties along the Highway 100 corridor, Greenfield to Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, everybody. So just a quick recap, back in June 28th of this year, we introduced the topic to the Safety and Development Committee. And since that time, we started with our first round of outreach to property owners of the Highway 100 corridor. That initial letter went out on the 28th of July. Reached out to roughly about 50 or so property owners along the corridor between Lincoln Avenue south to the South City limits in that first round. We had an open house for property owners at the August meeting, an August informational meeting here in this room. We only received one property owner came in to see us that night. There were some other calls that we had received, but really no objections to date. And then what we're doing tonight is pretty much reporting back to the Safety and Development Committee, and then also introducing our round 2 schedule of rezonings. So to date, we haven't put this on a planning commission agenda yet. We've just sort of briefed the planning commission on what we're doing, but we haven't asked them to act on it just yet, nor have we scheduled a public hearing before the council. So we just want to brief you all first, and then you can direct us to proceed as at will. So this is, again, just sort of recap of the first round from Cleveland Avenue south. We're looking at properties, everything south of Cleveland here. So this is the Office Max, and Aspen Dental is up here in the corner now. The parcel lines aren't shown on that yet, but the former Blaze Pizza, now Spectrum, everything south of National Avenue. These are smaller lots, primarily along the east side of Highway 100, south of Cleveland Avenue. And just sort of a range of different businesses within this area. For the most part, there really aren't, by rezoning these, in this case, we're going to be upzoning from C4 to C3. And what that does is sort of takes a look at some of the, it's going to prohibit any kind of C4 uses, such as thrift shops, check cashing, nominal price retail stores. If we upzone them to C3, those types of uses wouldn't be allowed, on these properties. We do have some check cashing stores. We do have actually in this slide here, a narcotic treatment center. So those types of things would not be allowed in a C3 as they are currently within this area. So that's primarily the purpose behind this, as well as to align these properties along the Highway 100 corridor with our future vision for the corridor, as well as our comprehensive plan, which in some cases calls for properties along the corridor to be zoned commercially or commercial land use. And in other cases here, as we'll get into, there's actually split zone properties as well along the corridor. And just sort of now getting into the round 2, this is just the letter that we had sent out to property owners. Round 2 letter went out September 7th of last week. And you can see that, in some of these properties here, like this happens to be a Dairy Queen, number 2. No, I'm sorry, Tri-City Bank is number 2. You can see the frontage is commercially zoned, and then the back part of the property is light manufacturing. So again, one of the reasons why we'd like to sort of sync this with just one zone versus 2. Sorry. The other properties here that we're looking at in round 2 are the Club Self-Storage property. There's a Milwaukee County building here. Milwaukee County Shops building is number 3. Number 4 and 5 are Price Erecting. Number 6 is the fire station. So these are all zoned, light manufacturing right now. In some cases, council may not agree with staff's recommendation, and that's okay. I mean, you can direct us to, we like these properties, 1 through 3, but we don't like 4 and 5. But I guess our recommendation would be to eliminate split zoning, put it into one or the other category or district, and then furthermore, just as a proactive measure, taking a look at the types of uses you want along Highway 100, and then appropriately upzoning to avoid the unwanted types of uses. The next slide is just another example of properties, again in this round 2 version. This being south of Lincoln Avenue and down to Cleveland Avenue. And here, I guess one example, I mean, we've got it dashed here. This is our police department here. It's zoned light manufacturing. And what we'd like to do, and this doesn't have to happen in this right away, but what we'd like to do is separate the dog park property via certified survey map from the police station property, just making sure that the police station has enough land for their future needs.
Good idea.
And then our dog park, could have the rest, and then the south, the dog park area could become a park district. And then the police station, we would recommend be a C3 zone. Lots 13, or properties 13, 14, 15, 16, these are office buildings. This is an office building just west of the police department. This is a Freighter Medical Clinic. This is Rogers Hospital. This is Gordon Flash Company. So, you know, these things can exist in a commercial zoning district. They don't have to be zoned light manufacturing. And I would say, you know, unlike properties further north of Lincoln Avenue in this area, you have Sullivan Dental, you have, you know, some other light industrial uses further north, Roman Electric. I think those should remain light industrial up here, but everything, you know, south, I think this could be supported in a commercial zoning.
What does Lincoln Contractor Supply? Do they do any on-site repair of the heavy equipment they lease? Do you
Yeah,
know?
so I mean, Lincoln Contractor, I think we want to leave that alone. So this one here, so Lincoln Contractor is right here. This is going to remain, and then there's some other, I think AT&T and, you know, somebody else, some other shops down here. This is proposed to stay light manufacturing back here, but, you know, just I guess the frontage is along Lincoln.
Frontages, yeah.
You see that is changing. This one's this is a city property. It's a creek, part of the Hale Creek comes down and then sort of bends around. This is Menards here, so you know, it's split zoned. It probably should be rezoned one way or the other. And I don't, our future land use plan calls for this to be commercial, but I don't foresee this property being redeveloped. Honestly, I think we could probably do a land use map amendment and change it to either a park district or something else, or just leave it residentially zoned, maybe just one or the other.
Yeah, can't build on a
Yeah,
creek
right,
anyway.
right. You know, Menards is a good example of split zoning right here. You know, we've got you know, BMO, Harris Bank, Menards, the West Allis Center, which includes, you know, you've got Kohl's, Pick and Save, Home Goods. There's an empty vacant lot, number 24. So the frontages here along Cleveland and along Highway 100 are zone C4 regional commercial, and then parts of the parking lot and parts of the building are zone light manufacturing. Again, all of this could be rezoned to upzone to a C4 district in this area, and Menards would exist in that environment. The self-storage lot, for instance, or property here would become legal non-conforming. That doesn't mean they have to close up shop. They can continue to be self-storage, and they could even sell the property to another self-storage entity, and that could continue on. It's just if there's ever a lapse of 12 months or more than 12 months, that property number 21 would have to come in compliance with the C4 district if it should be rezoned. And it just sort of gets into some of the uses allowed in each of the M1 districts, C4 district, and C3 districts. So nominal price retail stores are allowed in C4, but not in C3, not in M1. Vehicle dealerships allowed in C4 and M1, but not in C3. Only indoor is allowed in C3. Check cashing, again, not permitted in C3, but C4 and M1. So just some examples. What else do we have in here that might be pertinent? Medical clinics are allowed across the board. Hotels allowed across the board through all of these. I think C3 still does a pretty good job of accommodating, I think, uses that we'd like to see along Highway 100. Only be taking, you know, being a little bit more strategic about what we don't necessarily want to see in some areas of the city. So next steps, we sent out the round 2 mailing to property owners, about 25 property owners, and between Greenfield and Cleveland Avenue. We're going to host a neighborhood open house here on the 29th. In between now and then, too, we're open, you know, to listen to people if they want to call us or contact us in any way. Happy to explain it to them as well if they can't make the meeting. And then we want to report back to the Safety and Development Committee next month, early on. And then if everybody likes what they see, I guess we could go to the October Planning Commission meeting, and then also we could also schedule a public hearing. The fastest we could schedule that would be like November 2nd. So so maybe November 2nd or mid-November, but just wanted to give you a briefing tonight and just let you know where we're at. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any discussion on that or comments?
Mr. Chair? Yes, let's proceed.
Thank you. Thanks.
Item 4 on the agenda is a discussion on proposed court amendment to the development agreement between the City of West Allis and Cobalt Partners for South 70th Street corridor. Patrick?
Just one now, Patrick.
What now, right? This is part of the closing for the new market tax credit structure. Good thing is, and as I will tell CDA here shortly, is that the calls are ongoing. Their goal is to close before the end of the month on the new markets and the financing for the home two suites. The good thing today is I got an email asking when we can schedule a groundbreaking in October. So they want to start moving right away. That's a positive sign. So in order to get there, part of the structure, there's three things that need to happen, actually four. First one is, when we did the third amendment, I didn't change the completion date. I kept it at March of 2022. And they want to see that changed to a reasonable opening date. It'll take close to over a year to build the hotel. So the June 30th of 2023 seemed reasonable. They have it completed by. The big thing here, and Kayla is here to also outline this, is the area of the hotel that you see in this general corner, the purple area or the purple structure, this parcel, they're asking us to waive our repurchase rights. So this is essentially eliminates our collateral position based on the money that we've invested in the TIF district into that area, if we wanted to get this back. But at the same time, there will be a great deal amount of debt put on that parcel, and we would have to overcome that debt in order to get it back, such as if this doesn't perform, or there's new markets that we'd have to pay back, or the regular Waukesha State Bank financing. So they're asking us to waive that repurchase right. And the third is that it's an estoppel letter agreement that we need to just attest that there's no special assessment surcharges and no defaults on that, and I would need to sign that. So I put it into a fourth amendment for approval and to get that to the finish line. Kale, do you have anything to add? Does that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah, I mean, if there are any questions on the changes, those provisions, happy to answer those.
Yeah, I would like to know a little bit more about losing, regardless if it's a debt, losing any type of position on a repurchase, a collateral, prior to doing loans, it's, why?
So,
You can go ahead.
the city's in the unusual situation where we're not a primary lender as far as prioritization goes. And so that was always considered to be the nuclear option, where if things were really going bad, at least the city could buy the property back. We would take on all the debts and liens, though, and have to deal with that. So what we're really losing is more the control over the property by having that right to repurchase. It's not as though there's a financial advantage to doing the repurchase under the contract. But all that being said, there are other ways in which the city could secure its interests in a way that wouldn't harm the lenders necessarily, but it would not be through a repurchase, it would be through other avenues, which I don't know how much I want to get into that in a public meeting, but there are ways in which the city could secure control of the property if it was so interested.
So
If
did they
things went really bad.
They requested for that to be removed, why?
It perfects the bank's position, the Waukesha State Bank, and they're buying the tax credits. So it's just for them to have the
full-
complete control of the site as collateral.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, no,
But if taking it back would cost us money, wouldn't it cost Waukesha State Bank that? So is this really just a
Well,
technicality? Is
It's
it about liens and
it's
stuff?
because we're so subordinate to them.
We're so far down below.
Right, they just don't want they don't want us coming after them, and they have their position that the land is their collateral, they have their money in, and they can take it back for their debt. So that's what they could do.
And they don't want us coming to them saying, well, we technically,
My assumption is that they don't want the city to assert that repurchase interest and then have to deal with us and that lien. It gets a little messier from a lender's standpoint. So
for sure.
by eliminating that repurchase right, there's a very clear statutory way in which they'd enforce their lien rights without any complications.
Yeah, go to court call today and
Yep.
deal with one entity, not two.
If all goes well, this has no fiscal impact on us.
Correct. All goes well.
This wasn't, we need another 1.2 million.
Nope, there's no money.
There's
This is getting us to the finish line.
Yeah.
The other nuance on here was that the Common Council and the CDA approved a First Amendment, and it was to move the hotel from here to here.
Yeah.
And we never signed an agreement for it. but we had a resolution that did it. So now the banks are all asking, well, we have 2, 3, and 4, where's 1?
If I
So-
recall, the change was literally just an exhibit picture.
Yeah, it's an exhibit picture.
Secret.
There was going to be more, but that got married into 2. So that's where that happened, so that was the big amendment.
Any
That's
further
it.
discussion or questions?
This is just discussion, we don't need to act on it.
No, I thought I'd throw it on here tonight so that the resolution will be at the next council meeting. It might save you some time.
Thank you.
Anything else come before the committee?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Gail.
I'm gonna stay here.